What's up everyone, my name is Complete Spy, and in this video I'm going to show you 5 great tips to bettering your building. This is going to be some of the most important tips that you can use to increase the quality of your builds. So let's get right on into number 1. Alright, so first up is block and texture variation. These are among the most important techniques that you can use in your builds to make them have higher detail and realism. So first up, you can see right here this rock formation. It looks pretty decent. It's nice and smooth. It looks natural, you know, but it's all the same block. And normally this would be fine, but when you're going for really high quality builds, you really want to step up the textures and amount of variation in color as much as you can. So here's an example of something that is a bit better. You can see incorporated some of the cobblestone into the mix. So that definitely gives it a better, you know, texture variety, and it kind of breaks up the smoothness of the other one to make it look more craggy, more rocky than the other one did. So after you've added in at least one block to break up the uniformity of your build, then you can add a second one. It's often best to add a second one. As you can see here, I have added some gravel, and that gives another texture to the build. I've also added in these stone brick walls, and that gives it depth, and I'll talk about that later. But you can see this compared to this back here is definitely a significant improvement. So that's just some food for thought. Alright, so tip number 2 is depth. Depth is another really big one. If you want your builds to look real, you gotta add depth. So here we have a basic house front. Now this has, you can see it's all on the same block plane. There's no variation in depth, and it doesn't look very good. So here is a slightly improved version of the previous one. You can see I've moved back the wool blocks as well as the door and wall here, and it really gives it that pop of depth that you really need to make it look good. I've also added in some fences here, and that adds in a little bit of detail, and I'll go on about that later. And here is the final product. As you can see, it looks much better already from the other two. And that is because I have added these stairs to kind of, you know, smoothen the transition between each of the curves. And I have also moved out the support structure twice, 2 blocks forward, to just add another level of depth. I've also added these stairs here to give it just another variation in depth. You can see it starts here and then comes out a bit more, even higher up, and then transitions into this. And I've also used the technique that I showed you earlier of texture variation, and that adds some nice different textures to this wool background, as well as the stone wall in the background. On to number 3. Number 3 is detail. Detail is extremely important for your builds if you want them to turn out right. This is a castle wall. It is extremely boring. There is nothing on the front of it whatsoever. There's nothing special to say about it whatsoever. Once again, here is the slightly improved version of the previous one. As you can see, it has been propped out. The battlements have been popped out. And now, depth and detail are very closely intertwined. So if you have, the more depth you have, the more detail you'll be able to pack into your builds. So keep that in mind. Finally, here is the completed version of the build. I've added a lot more depth just so I can pack in some more details. I've also added these arches as well as these stone brick walls just to add some flair to it. And I've also used the first technique that I showed you, which is texture variation and block variation, to give it even more detail. Tip number 4 is always add organics. Now, organics are things like foliage, leaves, trees, bushes, terrain, and even other things like animals, people, stuff like that. Now, here I have an example of the worst terrain and organics you could ever do. The terrain is very symmetrical, and you do not want symmetry in your terrain. That is a very bad thing. If you ever have symmetry in your terrain, get rid of it. You always want terrain to be random. And as for this tree, this is just a regular bone-mealed tree that Minecraft comes with. And when building, you do not want to use these because they don't look realistic at all, and they're extremely easy to do. Here's an example of an improved version of the previous one. The terrain is 10 times better. It is not symmetrical. It's always random. Randomness is best when going with terrain. So that is much more improved. Also, the tree, as you can see, I have added some more to the bottom, as well as kind of randomized the leaves. Most natural things are random. You don't want symmetry or flatness in terrain unless you're going for a specific type of terrain. Here is an example of one of the better types of terrain and organics that you can do. First of all, I've added grass to the terrain at the bottom. This always makes it look better. Always add grass, add flowers. It really livens up the build and increases the detail. Also, the tree has been dramatically improved. The leaves have been altered so that they're swooping down more. The branches have been added. Also, the trunk gets thicker at the bottom and roots have been added. These are all small details that can completely upgrade your build. Tip number 5 is don't overdo it. You don't want to overdo any of the previous techniques. You don't want to over texturize. You don't want to add too much depth. And it's the same with detail. You don't want to add too much detail. And also, you finally don't want to add too many organics. And it starts clogging up your build by then. So if you keep these tips in mind the next time you're building, you're sure to have a better product in the end. So thanks for watching, everyone, and I really hope you enjoyed. If you did, be sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe for more content coming in the future. Thanks, guys.